How something is administered definitely matters. And, this goes to a reference where I said the other day about, how I was communicating certain things with a friend that I had grew up with. Um, and eventually, God brought him back around. But even when he came around, even though it was some things that he was wrong about, there were definitely some things that I was wrong about and how I handled it. And God showed that to me as well. So when he came back around, I definitely made sure that, I reached out to him and apologized to him about those situations, especially ones where in which I was wrong. Um, I misunderstood him a lot on certain situations, and he would bring out, some valid questions about the Bible at times. And sometimes it would be questions like, why do you think that? But other times it was very valid questions that at the time I wasn't mature enough to answer. But in experiencing it, I learned this valuable lesson myself. And also with the example I just shared with my father, um, dealing with the different believers, I had described this to him. I said, it's one thing if you use the word on a believer at times, depending how mature that believer is, you're pruning them. Um, when an unbeliever, you're cutting. And so, the representation of Peter using, the sword wrong um, in a garden, I think was more focused on, it could be interpreted for some believers or baby believers, um, or people who are even interested and want to know who he is, or who happen to find out who he is by an unfortunate circumstance like that. But it also applies to unbelievers. And in that situation, with an unbeliever, instead of getting pruned, when you cut an unbeliever in the wrong particular way, you can cause them to want to dismiss the gospel forever, to not want to hear it. And you don't want to close the door on somebody who God is trying to reach out to, because there's a reason why you're trying to administer or you're trying to communicate the gospel to them in the first place. So the best thing to do is to do it right. And how you do it right is to go through those steps of making sure that yourself is right, consecrating yourself, and making sure that you walking with God. That's the first step. But also um, observing your motives as well when you're speaking certain things, because it could either cause that person faith to increase to where now they're doing certain things on their own, or it could cause that person to crash out, fall away. Um, it could cause that person to go into depression. Now, that's not saying we shouldn't preach a strong word or preach or talk against stuff that people practice every day, or speak against the things that go on in society. But as I've tried to describe, Christ didn't deal with everybody the same. He didn't deal with the Pharisees and the people who came to see him exactly the same. He didn't deal with, um, his words. While I'm sure he spoke with authority at all times, it didn't seem as stern and as sharp to people who were coming to him for mercy and trying to understand who he is. And so it's important how we communicate things, and make sure that your motives and different things are clean, so everything can be received properly. Peace.